Hi, and welcome back to the Intentional Wealth Update with Morton Brown Family Wealth. I'm Dennis Morton.
Hi, and I'm Katie Brown.
So Katie, today we're going to do a little bit of pulling back the curtain and talking about what it's like being a financial advisor in a crisis. And what we hope to accomplish today is discovering some of the common humanity that we have with our clients, because we're not robots, and when the markets are volatile, we experience some of the same emotions. And what we've seen in recent days is some of the sharpest volatility in the stock market than we've seen in well over 10 years. So Katie, tell me a little bit about some of the emotions that churn up with our clients and maybe some of the ones that you can relate to as well.
Yeah, we talk a lot about uncertainty, and there's always uncertainty. It's never not present, but there's a certain level of fear that goes along with that. It's interesting because a lot of the conversations that we've had with clients, it's either one of two things. One, they are concerned, they have some fears about their own financial situation, or they are concerned about how we are doing and they want to check in with us. And they kind of come to the table saying, I know we're okay. I know what you're going to say. I know the plan's solid. How are you doing? And I always appreciate that. I do appreciate the conversation though, to help a client get to that spot as well. And that is our privilege, our work, and sometimes our challenge as advisors to help clients get to that place.
Yeah, I was sharing with you earlier that the speed with which things have happened this time, speed matters. It makes things feel that much worse, that much more uncertain. Sometimes things drag out over time and you get kind of a long protracted bear market or pullback or just kind of bouncing around. And that has its own challenges, but I especially feel the speed impacts me a lot more. So I tend to catastrophize. So when I see 5%, I'm immediately thinking, okay, what if this goes to 15? What if it goes beyond? Which in a healthy way kind of helps me to plan a little bit and to think through all the what ifs, the ways that we could be proactive if something like that happens. But it's still a little bit of it creates a little bit of anxiety in dealing with things. And actually conversations with clients help, because as I'm sharing my perspective with the client, I'm also thinking it through myself. Like, this is not something that's happening in a vacuum. It's the kinds of things that help me to keep my plan, this business, and the world in some kind of context.
Yeah. Yeah. Every client conversation is super helpful because every client conversation, there's something new that informs us. It's either how somebody might be digesting something. It could be the specific things that they focus on. It could be kind of how communication happens. Sometimes we learn a lot about communication within a household during periods of volatility in the markets too. So there's always something that's helpful to us as advisors when we have conversations during up markets and down markets. And then to bring that back to the advisory table as well is super helpful for us to actually be kind of our own support network within the firm as well, so that we can digest what we are hearing and be able to come back to the client and figure out a good way to support them with wherever they are at emotionally.
It's something you and I have talked about before that we share in common, or just a fear or anxiety is, am I missing something? Like, especially when things are moving fast. Tell me more about that. How does that feel? Like, what do you think you're missing?
Yeah, that is my biggest stressor when we have periods of market volatility. It's not as much for me. It's not as much about concerns about what is the market doing today and what is it going to do tomorrow. I know that I can zoom out during different periods. We know over longer term, periods, the markets move up and to the right, but it's never a smooth line. That doesn't make it easier in the moment. And in the moment, my biggest concern is always, who am I missing? Is there somebody out there that needs to have a conversation that we haven't spoken yet? And we might have even called and left a message and they don't call us back because they're anxious about it. And it's, paying attention to who's being quiet and also who's being vocal. And is there somebody else out there that maybe it's somebody I spoke with last week and they need another conversation. So that constant, who am I missing? What am I missing during these times? That's my biggest stressor when the markets are acting up.
Yeah, we started reaching out to people in the last couple of weeks to check in with them. We kind of prioritize the people who have come on board in the last couple of years, call it since the beginning of 2023, because it meant they weren't with us during the last bear market of 2022. And the reassuring thing, if we look for evidence that we're being effective in the work that we do, it's that many times clients that have worked with us for some time, they'll come to us and say, I know what you're going to, either one, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm weathering this well, or I know what you're going to say, I just need to hear it again. Just remind me again what we talked about the last time we went through this. But for newer people, this is our first rodeo. We've never gone through this together, and it's an opportunity to learn to speak the same language about how you're doing, how we monitor your plan, manage your expectations and assumptions, and hopefully start to build that confidence.
Yeah. Dennis, what do you do when markets start to raise anxieties? How do you manage that personally, and how do you navigate through that?
So one thing I know about myself is that I think the term might be hypervigilance. Like I'm constantly kind of scanning the horizon. I don't watch a lot of news. I don't have a TV in my office here, and I manage how I digest information, but I'm always looking, and I have to really intentionally disconnect sometimes. So we went through a week last week where there was just a constant flow of information, which creates stress for all of us, I think. And at the end of the week, it just so happened that my weekend was scheduled almost entirely outside, and it was a miserable rainy weekend, but I was outside in it the whole time. I did a long race or a long hike on Sunday, and just that getting out into nature, getting oxygen in my lungs is such a huge antidote for all of that. So by the time I was recording this on a Monday, by the time I came on Monday, I feel like I had cleansed the stuff from last week and was ready to approach it with fresh eyes. And then the first thing I did this morning was reach out and call a couple clients. I always feel like I feel better having kind of communicated that, maybe been effective in helping somebody to work through that confidence piece. Those two things that got me through the pandemic, I think I learned early on in the great financial crisis in my career, that communication and getting the oxygen in my lungs are really effective ways to manage the stress.
No, I love that you said that you called a couple of clients, because that's helpful. I think bringing clarity to that unknown. So that unknown of how are the clients feeling? How are they doing? From a client perspective, sometimes the last thing you want to do when there's a lot of, market sell-offs is look at your plan, look at the big picture, because it can be scary. But when you shine that light on the unknown and you bring some of those things to the forefront, that can be one of the best things that you can do during this time, because now you're looking at your plan under stress, and hopefully you're in a position where you are okay, or you know what you need to do to be okay. And I think that goes a long way, not only in managing today's volatility, but tomorrow's and next year's and the year after that and the next time that it comes. Like, it is a muscle that you need to work on to build over time, and so that you can get to that place of confidence and have that conversation to say, I know what you're going to say, and I know I'm okay. It's okay for us to repeat it, but I love shining the light on that unknown.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit about, there's a flip side to that communication, though, too, sometimes, is that transfer of weight.
Guess one of my biggest anxieties is who do I need to speak with? Are people okay? What am I missing? And there's a weight to that, a weight in figuring out where do I need to show up, and how do I need to show up? And then every conversation, one of my goals, and I sign up for it voluntarily, happily, is to hopefully take a little bit of weight off of somebody else's shoulder, to help bring them some of that clarity, to help them feel a little bit better, and to kind of pull some of that weight on me. During periods like this, when we're speaking with a lot of clients frequently, it does start to build up and it starts to feel heavy. Like, at the end of the day, I'm just kind of heavy. And to your point, getting out for oxygen, like I know that's something I need to feed my body with as well, my body and my mind. And you and I have talked about this before, is that I know that I can kind of flip that switch sometimes when I need to. Like, I can get home and move into home mode instead of work mode. And that's like, I need to do that to be able to drop some of that weight that I've picked up and I've been carrying throughout the day. So that's, a little bit of how that shows up for me as an advisor, and I think probably for some other advisors too.
Yeah, a friend of mine he runs a different type of business, but he uses an analogy of like a backpack. Picture like a hiker's backpack that has stuff strapped on it, maybe a bedroll on top, and it's just filled to the gills. And he says, I'll have that sitting next to my desk. And every person that comes into my office is leaving one more thing. And I'll say, I'll take that and put that in my backpack. And at the end of the day, no matter how heavy it got, you're still kind of going, putting on the backpack and going back out there. And sometimes if you're not careful, you can end up carrying too much weight and it really starts to become burdensome. And I love the analogy because just going back through and saying, what don't I need to be carrying anymore? Are there things that I can safely ignore? Are there issues that aren't mine to solve? Are there things that are so small, but in such quantities that they're adding weight to me? So I try and sift through and at least prioritize, or if I do feel like that weight's getting big, it's like, okay, you're not going to think of everything. We don't, and that's another thing that goes in that, what can I control and what can't I? And that's a really important thing to remember during a crisis, is that we can't determine what the market is going to do. All we can do is decide to be proactive instead of reactive.
Right. And for clients that are watching this and that know us, you know that we look for opportunities to bring simplicity and to push against complexities. Simple, but not too simple. We need to make sure that we are addressing all the things that we need to address, like, tax efficiency, looking for opportunities, good investing discipline, but we're constantly looking for ways to streamline a balance sheet, to be smart about different elections that we make. We lean towards simplicity. And I think at times like this, that's another way that we intentionally shed some of that weight. That's another way that we can say, we don't need the added weight of this complex strategy that's not going to necessarily further what we're trying to achieve. And I think being very cognizant of that, these are the times that it shows up in a positive way.
Yeah, and you have to fight for that simplicity. It really is tough. I mean, especially now. And Katie, any particular recommendations for people if they're feeling the pressure right now? What are some just general things? We talked about things that work for us, but is there anything you would recommend that they do to try and bring things a notch down from an anxiety perspective?
Honestly, it is checking in on your plan. It is having that conversation, which might feel like a tough conversation. It is leaning on your advisor. Once again, I mean, we talked about the weight of it, but I am very happily standing over here, raising my hand, welcoming a conversation, because to your point, Dennis, it's better to have the conversation than not have the conversation.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the first thing is really to check in.
Yeah, I think diversifying your sources. I think it's very easy. Sometimes people fixate on, one source or a commentator on financial news or something like that and say, oh my gosh, they said this, and apply a lot of weight to that. The diversification of sources really helps. Or go for a walk, read a book. Crises are transient, this too shall pass. These are all things that we think about openly and we talk about as a team. We share with our staff because they're the ones answering the phones and have to understand that everyone's walking in with something. And the thing that's making them anxious might be different from the last person who walked in or the next one. So these are open conversations that we love to have. If you feel like you need to have an extra conversation, that's what we're here for.
Thank you.